Hey, welcome back, guys. Again, we're going to do Weather Wednesdays. This is video two in the series. Today, we're going to go over thunderstorms, and you're catching me while I'm down in Miami. So, thunderstorms seem to be a pretty good thing. It occurs here all the freaking time. So, we're going to talk about that and some things that kind of come into there. I got my buddy Mike Gronke with me again today to talk about this and to go over some stuff. If you don't know who he is, watch the last video. I'll put something up here, and that way you can see the last video. And I'm doing this just because he said I would have to at some point.
Yeah, that's right. Right here.
Yeah. Again, shameless plug. I'm always going to say like and subscribe if you like this content and you want us to do more of it. And obviously, this is something for anybody from a student pilot up through an ATP. If you learn something, put a comment. If you don't learn something, keep it to yourself, and then you can move on and watch another video.
Maybe you'll learn something next time. Watch the next video.
Yeah, exactly. Watch the next one. Maybe you'll learn something then. All right, Mike. So we're going to talk about thunderstorms. So you can. I'll let you start kind of however you want, where you want to start with it. But thunderstorms, where we're going to be focusing on.
Sure, thunderstorms, where you get a lot down there. My little minor intro is I'm in Ohio where we don't get a lot. We actually got a good one a few days ago. That was a rare. Actually, that was like the one time it rained in this entire month, I think. But yeah, not a whole lot up here. So we'll let me get this off going here. I just have some bullet points here. This is more or less just what I wanted to talk about with everyone. But from the beginning here, what do you need for a thunderstorm? Well, warm, moist air would be one key. And when I say warm, moist air, that kind of would imply that it's unstable air. And so you have the moisture, you have the instability, is what the actual term would be called. And then if you have all that there, that's great, but you need something to actually trigger it. And that would be a source of lift. The way I always explain it is if you have a campfire and you have all of your logs and kindling and stuff set up, that's the warm, moist air. Like the ingredients are there to have a fire, but if you don't have a spark to get it going, you're never going to get a fire. So you have to have that source of lift to really start the air lifting, and then it'll be able to use that warm, moist air as the source of energy. And then the last thing you'll see, I put a shear or wind shear, and I said in parentheses to sustain. You don't technically need wind shear to have it just a thunderstorm, but it certainly helps the thunderstorm become a lot more robust. It helps it. It's going to increase the odds of it being a severe thunderstorm, and it's going to be able to sustain a lot longer if it has wind shear, which we can explain here. Actually, I'll just go ahead and I have a little. I think I have a little graphic down here. Yeah, there we go. It's actually in the slideshow. So this is a super complicated bunch going on with a graphic, but the point of this really is when you have wind shear, instead of the thunderstorm being straight up and down, you see it's kind of like that angle there. And what that allows it to do, there's not always going to be a tornado, although wind shear, which first of all, you should have stopped me. Wind shear is a change of wind speed or direction as you go higher up in the atmosphere. So that can be something that can lead to a tornado. It does not necessarily mean you're going to have a tornado. I know this graphic here shows the most mature possible, craziest thunderstorm ever of life. But what the wind shear does is it has that tilted updraft, and so it allows the storm to continue to ingest warm air from its surroundings. If the storm is perfectly up and down, eventually, you have an updraft in a thunderstorm. That's the warm air being lifted up. But eventually, that air comes back down to the ground as a downdraft. All of this involves lots of turbulence, by the way, as you can imagine. But the downdraft is all that cool air and the rain-cooled air being brought back down to the ground. And eventually, that air under the thunderstorm is going to get cooled off. And the thunderstorm basically is going to kill itself or choke itself off because all of the air it's trying to ingest is now cooled down. When you have the sheared updraft, you have that angle where it's able to continue to bring in more moist, unstable air and sustain itself longer. Than just your straight up and down storm. The two like a key difference, or what you might think of like when this occurs versus when it doesn't in the middle of the summer, when you have just your isolated little thunderstorm cells that pop up because it's 95 degrees in Miami, and
Yeah.
crazy humid. Those are usually very low wind shear storms. We call them pulse variety or air mass thunderstorms. They just bubble up because there's lots of instability, and there was some kind of little trigger for it. In Miami, it's usually like a sea breeze coming inland or something. Um, but those storms they pulse up real heavy and they collapse and die out. Now, when they collapse, they may send that cold air out from them and trigger a new storm, but that one individual cell is not going to last very long generally.
Well, that it's funny that you say like a sea breeze or something like that because you can almost set your watch by when the storms occur down here.
Yep.
You can walk into a building, it'll be sunny, it'll be just sunny as can be outside, and an hour later you're getting drenched because there's a storm that all of a sudden just popped up and just starts dumping on you. It's crazy.
Yeah, and I one of the unique things about Florida is that since you're a peninsula, you actually can get sea breezes from both sides of the state. And I remember like when we went to Disney World, they told us the same thing, and I was like, yeah, right. As if it's going to storm at like 3 o'clock every single day, and like on the third day, you're like, they're actually on something here. Okay, like
Yep.
that's the
Well,
way this
look, here
happens.
it's time to storm.
How about that? And so though you get those two sea breezes, but the one sea breeze alone can be enough, like a little mini front trigger. When the two collide together, that's obviously even more oomph to kind of get something going. And so that's kind of a unique element to Florida that not a lot of other places have. This is another example. This is if you have like a big this says convective system, it says you get those big giant lines of thunderstorms. When you have lots of wind shear, it keeps which it says gust front or the cold air being pushed out of the thunderstorm kind of at bay, and that keeps the storm able to continue to ingest warm moist air. Whereas if the wind shear is a little bit weaker or non-existent, that cold air rushes out from the thunderstorm, and now you no longer have a source of warm air for that thunderstorm to thrive off of. So back to here. So again, those are the ingredients. We actually just kind of touched on the various types of thunderstorms. So you can have storms along a front. That's usually along a cold or warm front. Those tend to be your kind of big lines of thunderstorms that traverse across the country. Air mass thunderstorms. Those would be what we were just describing down in Florida. There's no real focal point of what's causing them. It's very hot and very humid. There may be a sea breeze, but they're just kind of popping up. And then you have what's called MCS or multi-cell thunderstorm. MCS is the mesoscale convective system. Again, that's actually also your line of storms. I kind of accidentally double labeled that. Those are your double lines, or those are your big arcing lines, big bow echo, if you will. I had a radar picture of that, but I totally lost it. But I think everyone knows what I'm talking about when you get those big lines coming in. The one I'm missing off here, because I can't label things properly, is a supercell thunderstorm. And actually, we have a good picture of that here. So here's a radar. These are like the mother of all thunderstorms, right? This is like the ultimate, you have just enough wind shear, but also just enough instability, and it's all happening in the same place. And so this is where you get the supercell thunderstorms. They're kind of like an air mass thunderstorm because it's just one single cell, but there's a lot of wind shear involved. The common thing you'll see with these, if they're either about to produce a tornado or are producing a tornado, is this hook echo, where you get the rain wrapping around the rotation in the thunderstorm. You can kind of actually see on this right picture here a little bit of a darker blob of red at the tip of that arrow. That might even be what's called a debris ball. That would be at that point there is a tornado on the ground, because what that is all this debris being lofted by the thunderstorm, and the radar actually picks up. When the radar beam goes out, it just sees energy, right? So it's just whatever is there. Anything that's obscuring the beam, it's going to reflect back. So if there's trees, or from the tornado movie another cow, there's all those out there. It sees all that, and it's just like color it red because they're all like dense objects. And so that's where you get this big debris ball.
So is that so? Like when we're talking about the difference between a tornado watch versus
Mm-hmm.
a tornado warning, the tornado warning can occur even if it's not seen by anybody. If no one has physically seen it come down, but if they see the debris on
Yeah.
radar.
So a tornado watch just means that the conditions are favorable for a tornado to form. The one of the corniest way or analogies I've seen is like you pick whatever favorite food you want. We'll just say like, a burrito, right? If I have a tortilla and I have like, the chicken and the corn and all the stuff you want just laying on the counter, there's a burrito watch, right? So the conditions or the ingredients are there for a burrito to form, but the burrito is not actually there. If I were to put all those together and make a burrito, and now I actually am holding a burrito, now there's a burrito warning. So in this case, the burrito is actually happening. It is very delicious. I'm about to eat. So the tornado warning means all those ingredients actually came together, and it has now actually formed a tornado.
Okay,
So
with the tornado, it seems pretty cut and dry, right? Like
yeah,
if the tornado is on the ground, it's found that it's on the ground, then
yeah.
it's a warning. So like, where's the line for like thunderstorms? Like if I'm in an area that's a thunderstorm watch versus a thunderstorm
Mhm.
warning, okay, a watch I'm assuming is still the conditions are right for there to be a thunderstorm.
Yeah.
At what point is it like, okay, now it's a warning? At what point does it cross that
So
line?
for thunderstorms, they're only going to issue that for what be considered a severe thunderstorm. So you'll get a severe thunderstorm watch or a severe thunderstorm warning. You don't get watches and warnings for just any old garden variety thunderstorm. The U.S. National Weather Service uses 50 knots or 58 miles per hour as the wind threshold before they would issue a severe thunderstorm warning or 1 inch or greater hail. So if the
Oh,
radar would suggest that 50 knot winds are possible, or maybe it passes by and it passes by an airport and the METAR, shameless plug, watch our previous video, and the METAR says it's gusting 50 knots, then they would be forced to issue a severe thunderstorm warning because they've now observed 50 knot winds in that thunderstorm.
okay, okay.
So that's just kind of the threshold that's been determined to be, I guess, I think their tagline is the threat to life and property. Basically, the point at which like this can now actually do damage. Like if the hail is under 1 inch, your car is probably fine. Once it starts getting above an inch, that's when that hail can actually start doing damage to your car or crops or whatever.
Makes sense.
Same thing for wind. 50 miles an hour doesn't. I mean, a tree could come down at 50 miles an hour, but more than likely, when it's less than 60 miles an hour, um, most trees are going to be okay in that range. So, little bonus here on the radar, just for anyone who is a weather nerd or just likes looking at cool radar. This is an example. This is the same image on the left and right, but on the left you have your stereotypical radar, which is called reflectivity, or just the rain coming back image. On the right, you have what's called the velocity or the wind. You have the wind going away from the radar and towards the radar in the green and red. When those two are right up against each other right there, and you also have and it's in the same location based on the radar that you'd expect to be a tornado. That's a good indication that the tornado may be either about to form or is currently forming. You can see the arrows here going two different directions. If you kind of can imagine, like if you're holding a pen in your hand and the wind, you go back and forth like this, what does the pen do? It starts to spin. So that's what's going on
Oh,
in this picture. Wind's going two different directions, and you basically have that column of air that is going to begin to spin. And if it reaches the ground, then you have a tornado.
okay.
So that's your if you're flying, if you're a private pilot, you really need to look at the velocity on the radar. I just think that's there. I will say this: there's a lot of private pilots out there who are also weather nerds, so I thought I'd throw it in. So
Yeah. Well, and at the same time too, because now when you have like a severe weather event that
mhm.
shows up even on local news when you're sitting at home, that's the
That's true.
freaking thing
They
they
do.
go to. They go to the wind
And
and show
partially
you.
because I mean it's that balance for them, right? Of like they need to like that for a meteorologist, that's actually vital information. Just looking at the radar, I mean the rain unless you're seeing like a debris ball, which means it's like a huge tornado. The main radar reflectivity isn't going to necessarily tell you if there's a tornado. The
Yeah.
velocity image or a couple other products that the radar can return are what's really going to tell you. So they're trying to kind of diagnose the situation in real time while talking to you, the public. So,
Right.
so yes.
Well, and
So
the other thing
that's why
is,
I think you've seen that kind of come up more is because they need to be able to see also what's going on to
right.
assess the
And
situation.
it's one of those things where when you're looking at the radar return, like the radar return is it's pretty colors for us, but with it not really giving you the information you need, it would be kind of difficult for them to be able to determine anything. But
Exactly.
I'll tell you, man, that's the best explanation I've heard by looking because I mean I because of you, I've kind of turned into a little bit of a weather nerd where I dig into this stuff a
Yes.
little bit more than I used to.
Yeah.
And when I lived in Ohio there and we had the storms come through and I would watch the wind stuff, I didn't understand like the pin getting stuck between
Yeah.
two air masses. Like I would have never thought that. I was expecting to see some sort of like a hook in the wind pattern for a
Yeah.
rotation, but
It's really, it's kind of more just that's what the radar is able to see, and on the two-dimensional plane that you're looking at it at, that's just kind of that's all the image can produce. Um, so there's other ways to kind of look at this in like a 3D view, but that gets usually beyond what the normal person would want to see. So
yeah.
um, so yeah, that's kind of your those are your like what we just looked at. That's like the highest end. Like that's pretty much as bad as it gets, for like a supercell thunderstorm. Um, as far as some of the ingredients, one of the key things, like I mentioned before, is instability. Um, I put on here a lifted index. That's kind of me and Brandon were just joking before this. That's kind of an old school, but for some reason, a lot of like your private pilot weather aviation books, they just love lifted index. Um, CAPE is the more widely used ones, particularly by meteorologists. It stands for convective available potential energy. All this is just a way to just basically quantify how much energy is in the atmosphere. But again, it's potential energy, right? So that's kind of like your fire. Like, do you have like two logs there to make a small fire? Do you have like 10 logs to make a big fire? But again, if nothing ever starts to fire, you don't have a fire. So it's all potential energy, but it's just a way to kind of know like to what degree is the atmosphere unstable, and what is it capable of producing if thunderstorms were to develop.
Okay.
We kind of already mentioned the wind shear. That's going to change of wind direction with height. That kind of rolls into turbulence. So that can be something that causes turbulence as you're flying if you encounter a sudden change of wind direction, either as you're changing altitude or as you're just flying level. Um, the wind shear. What we really look for tornadoes is what we call backing winds at the surface. So the wind's kind of blowing back to the southeast. That tends to occur right along a warm front. Not the only way you can get a tornado, but as a very common way they had to have tornadoes form. If you get a supercell that forms right along a warm front, you have that southeast wind at the surface that curls around to a west wind as you go further up. You can visualize it on a picture, but it's going southeast around the west is that kind of counterclockwise swirl that you'd want to get that kind of uh, rotation in the thunderstorm.
So, so let me ask you this: is there, you said it's more common along warm fronts for thunderstorms. I'm assuming that warm fronts are where they normally occur, right? Like you don't normally get a cold front with a thunderstorm. Am I understanding that right?
So you could have either front with produce thunderstorms because really a front, not to spill into, we'll have you in a future video, but fronts themselves are effectively a source of lift. A warm
Okay.
front's more of a sloping gradual versus a cold front's a real harsh, sharp cut off in the air usually. But either of those are going to be something that's going to lift the air, and would be potentially your source of lift to cause thunderstorms. Like I said, all right, like we mentioned earlier when we were, I think before the video started, there is no absolutes in weather. So I can't tell you that tornadoes only form along warm fronts. They certainly can form along a cold front as well. But a kind of more classic scenario is if you have a warm front and thunderstorms, forming along that warm front. That would be a location as a meteorologist to be aware of, like where is that warm front? Oh, I see this cell starting to interact here with that warm front. this is one they'll kind of watch more closely because it's in like basically the whole area might be generally favorable, but that is the most favorable place for harmonic
Gotcha.
development. So,
Okay.
and I mentioned on your echo tops, that is something. I know that if you're a private pilot, you don't really care whether the top's 20,000, 40,000 feet. You're not going that high. But as you progress in your career, maybe we got someone watching who's an ATP pilot and you're flying 737s at 40,000 feet or whatever. Echo tops are something that can be a great way to kind of understand what you're looking at, what you're going to be encountering as you fly. So let me first show this is the current radar in the Great Plains. Nice line of thunderstorms going through Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, what have you. Basically, if I'm looking at that just from the radar, I'm like, I'm not flying anywhere near any of that stuff. That looks super scary.
Right.
But this northern side here, if we switch this over to the echo tops, and the echo top being the what's the altitude that the radar is seeing the last bit of reflectivity, which is going to be approximating where the tops of the clouds are. You see a lot of pockets in here where it's just in the green color. If we scroll down, well, that's only 15 to maybe 25,000 feet. So that might be an area where, hey, if you're cruising across the country at 40,000 feet, that's not really an issue. Now, sure, down here, these lines of storms are red color. That's 45, 55,000 feet. You're not flying over that. You're going around that. But the echo tops also kind of give you that more direct idea of like where are the holes, how soon does it drop off. That's just it's a good tool to use if you're flight planning, and you need to go through because a lot. I mean, it is not abnormal in the U.S. to get gigantic lines of storms. In some cases, that span almost the entire country from north to south. And so having something else in your toolkit to kind of decipher what's really going on, especially at a higher level in the atmosphere, is something that's I think pretty handy.
Yeah. Now, looking at that though, so
Mhm.
when you look at the echo tops, that is not an indication in any way of how strong any of those thunderstorms are, just simply where the tops of the thunderstorms are, right?
It can indirectly be an indication. Now, I won't say that 20,000 foot storms can't be bad. You can have situations where there's maybe just not as much instability, but there's a ton of wind shear, and there could be tornado type weather happening down at the surface. But as a whole, um, a more robust thunderstorm is going to be a taller thunderstorm.
Okay.
So I would say it'd be pretty safe to say these storms down here that are, what do we say? We'll call it 50, maybe even 55,000 feet. These are probably some pretty strong thunderstorms. Now, just because it's 55,000 feet doesn't mean it's a severe storm. Doesn't mean it's necessarily producing severe winds or large hail. But it is a very robust, because it has to be a robust updraft for that thing to get all the way up to 55,000 feet.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah. Yeah.
crazy high. So that takes a lot of energy and thrust to get the cloud up that high. So it's just one of those other, I guess, elements to kind of more be aware of for what could be a very strong thunderstorm.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I already kind of went over gust fronts, talking about how that's really the cold air coming out of a thunderstorm, and if you don't have as much wind shear, that's kind of a situation where that can actually lead to killing off the thunderstorm if it if it uh, if it's not mitigated. Basically, you're cutting off all of its warm air supply. Now, sometimes in the summer, you can get some really fun radar animations where one storm collapses, sends out a little gust front, and then a new one forms. And if it's almost like dominoes. I mean, if you look at like a whole afternoon's radar, it'll be like a couple storms start off, they send out gust fronts, which cause more storms, which send out even more gust fronts, which sound even it's just like a big just kind of
Yeah. And
snowballs basically into the
just
peak
kind of
of the day.
continues to build on each other until you get like a bigger line of storms.
Yeah. Actually, you may recall, Brandon, that one time when I told you that, hey, there's this line coming in and it's going to be near a gust front, and that's you need to kind of watch for some funny business to happen. And then that tornado occurred just
Yeah.
east of where we were working. So
Yep.
something else with gust fronts, it is a wind change, and so if you have a storm moving into an existing gust front, sometimes you can get a little funky business going on with the interaction of the different wind directions there as the storm comes in. So just Again, nothing's absolute. Just because a storm hits a gust front doesn't mean a tornado is going to occur. But as a meteorologist or even as a pilot looking at the weather, they're kind of those situations to kind of just be aware of and kind of know, hey, we need to kind of keep an eye on this type of thing. So
Okay. So
I think that's your biggest thing. What questions do you have for me that you think other people might have? And that's kind of the
well,
biggest
I
thing.
was going to say, can you, if you bring up that aviation.gov, with
Yeah.
our previous video, we talked about METARs and TAFs, and we were talking
Hmm.
about significant weather showing up on there. So if I'm at aviationweather.gov and I can look at, my map of the country, and then I get these things that are SIGMETs,
Yeah.
that I can look up as a pilot and that kind of stuff. What, like, I guess, what do those, kind of do for me, or what do those allow me to kind of look at? And
Sure. So SIGMET's significant meteorological something. I think advisory is what it stands for.
all
um, we have the convective SIGMETs. If you're
right, so we just had to come back because Mike had some technical difficulties, so there might be a little bit of a glitch in the video there. That was
the
meant to
computer had to
happen.
catch up to me. Sorry.
Yeah, that was meant to happen. So okay, Mike, we were talking
Totally.
about convective SIGMETs and what they
Yeah.
were.
Yeah. So I guess again, SIGMET, significant meteorological advisory. The convective SIGMET basically is outlining just a broad area where convective, or yeah, which is another term for thunderstorm activity, may be occurring. You can see in the remarks of this one here, it mentions tops above 45,000 feet. It says hail to 1 inch, wind gust is 60 knots possible. Obviously, that's if you're landing at the ground level, would you have that kind of winds from those storms? But it's not something to say that like, oh, this entire region is completely off limits. But it's a nice heads up of more substantial area of convective development or thunderstorm development is expected in this area, basically.
And
So
and then I guess who's responsible for putting out these SIGMETs? How do these SIGMETs get put out onto something like this?
those are, I think there's a collaboration between there's the center weather. What was it? It's actually right down here. CWA, the center weather. Each like I think they're kind of co-located with maybe air traffic centers. Um, so those are some offices that can. There's also the folks out in the Norman, Oklahoma. So I think it depends on like what level of or what type of SIGMET's being issued, but which agencies are the ones actually issuing
Gotcha.
it. Um, but it all is really coming from someone related to NOAA, we'll put it that way.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
um,
I guess my point is it's a SIGMET is going to be different than a PIREP, which a PIREP is a
yes,
pilot report where somebody says, "Hey, I flew through some clouds."
yes.
So I obviously
And
that
you
would be different.
And you can kind of get that on here based on what you're looking at the top. So like there's the different sections. So you have advisories. So here's your SIGMET or here's a center weather level advisory, which I guess there's nothing going on at that level at the moment. But your SIGMET advisories, all your forecast stuff and then observations. Here's your PIREPs, right? So a PIREP is just that's what it is, just a report of something that's going on. It could be turbulence, could be icing, um, whatever's happening. That's just an actual report. And I will call out the thunderstorm forecast. Here you go, convection. So the convection page on the Aviation Weather Center page, of course, you have your convective SIGMETs here. What's going on there? You have your collaborative thunderstorm forecast. Don't ask me where that or what that actually I think it's something collaborative convection product, something like that. There's your ECPF. That's like the enhanced one. This one basically is telling you like, what are some zones where we expect there to be thunderstorm development in the next couple of hours. You asked about severe thunderstorm watches and warnings. This will directly link you to the Storm Prediction Center, which are the ones they're out in Norman, Oklahoma. They're the ones that actually issue said watches. So here's a couple of watches that are currently in effect. It also links you to their convective outlook for the day. So this is basically this is only for severe weather. Well, I take that back. The light green actually shows you where any general thunderstorms may occur, but this categorizes the risk level or the likelihood of severe weather, and that being 50 knot winds, 1 inch hail or tornadoes occurring. And it has a scale, kind of a 1 to 5 scale, marginal, slight, enhanced, moderate, high of to what degree that's likely. So all great resources, and obviously there's a bunch of other websites out there too. I think the ads page has a lot, but there's obviously lots of websites out there that you can use for resources when you're looking at thunderstorm forecasts.
Well, cool, man. That was man. Again, this is the second video I've learned something, and that's again, it's always a good thing. Hopefully, those watching, you guys learned something too. Again, I appreciate Mike coming out and helping me with this. I mean, he knows more about it than I do, so I like to go to people that know more about things. That way, I can learn stuff too. Again, shameless plug. Like and subscribe. Everything down at the bottom. Make comments. Tell us what you want to see. Obviously, be respectful. I don't want to deal with all the disrespectful stuff. So if you want to see stuff,
that's all. We want you to nerd out about the weather in the comments.
Yeah,
that's what we want.
Exactly. We want you to be a weather nerd, because
that's right.
If it wasn't for Mike, I wouldn't be the way that I am now. So anyway,
that's good or bad. Well, debatable.
Yeah, good or bad. Whatever. I am what I am. It's fine.
That's right. Exactly.
So I appreciate you guys coming around for another Weather Wednesday. We'll be back next week with a different one. I think next week we're going to be talking about high pressure and low pressure systems and kind of some differences you might see across there. So look forward to having you come to watch that one, and we'll see you again next time. See ya.
See ya.